mentioned, I'm Andrew. I'm Andrew with Clean Fuels Ohio. As you can tell, we're recording this meeting so that we can share the recording with some folks that weren't able to join us today. Ask you all to remain on mute for the front end of the presentation. We're in the welcome and intros period, but we will then cover today some of the high level about the EVSC market and options. To give a little context on a planning framework for those of you so you can orient yourself on how best to approach this from the high level. Talk about Pathmaster and their company and their history, as well as their new EVSC options that they're working with a variety of customers on. We'll round out the initial presentation with a little bit more on EVSC grants and incentives here in Ohio, and then really want to open it up for Q&A. So while that final Q&A session will be available, we're happy to unmute you and have you ask questions verbally. We really encourage you to chat us your questions in advance, throughout the presentation. As they come up, you can chat us any questions, and I'll play voice of the audience, and we'll be happy to address those questions that are put to us in the chat. So with that, going to dive into a little bit more of an intro on who Clean Fuels Ohio is and what we do. Clean Fuels Ohio, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We are a designated U.S. Department of Energy Clean Cities Coalition. Really, our mission is to focus on the transportation sector and to make vehicles traveling throughout Ohio more efficient, environmentally friendly, and cost effective. So we do that in a variety of ways. We are fuel and technology inclusive, working on all the publicly or commercially available fuel and equipment technologies available today. However, today in this webinar, we're really focusing on electric vehicles. So we have a lot of other webinars and information, including a solution showcase that we're launching this week on our website, showcasing all the other fuels and vehicle technologies. Today, we're focused on electric vehicles, and when Clean Fuels Ohio is focused on electric vehicles, we do our electric vehicle work through a initiative of our coalition called Drive Electric Ohio. So really, that initiative focuses on a couple of several key pillars. We focus on grassroots consumer education through that program, local, state, and federal policymaker education with the goal of getting better policies to support electric vehicle adoption. We engage quite substantially with the electric vehicle and EVSE options in coordination with our utilities, whether that be the investor-owned co-ops or municipal utilities. We also do a lot of fleet electrification analysis and planning and deployment, as well as infrastructure deployment with public fleets, private fleets, workplaces, multi-unit residential buildings, you name it. We've been planning deployments across the board with partners, as well as dealer engagement to make sure more and more models are available in the state of Ohio, and that those dealers are ready to best serve customers who visit them looking for EVs, as well as increasingly a focus on ensuring equity and access to make sure that electric mobility options are available as widely as possible to all stakeholders. So that's a little bit about our approach to EVs in particular. In terms of the EVSC planning and assistance, I know we had a number of local governments and other folks attending this webinar and looking at being hosts for public charging in their locations. So we really work on all aspects of this. We do a lot of work on project development, really helping site hosts understand what's best for their end users, for their specific sites, specific EVSE hardware options, costs, benefits, all that. We've been working with folks on accessing funding and getting deployments of hardware and chargers funded. We've helped with RFPs and other ways to get folks looking for these products and services connected with local installers to install. We've worked on a lot of the policy and O&M options on the back end to make sure these are sustainable operating assets for the hosts, and then done training and promotions as well. So we're happy to assist folks in any of those ways if they want to work more closely with Clean Fuels Ohio going forward. We do also work closely with the Power Clean Future Ohio program, which is supported through grant funds from the Energy Foundation, really helping us to, and Clean Fuels Ohio is contracted to work with any Power Clean Future Ohio government member to do fleet analysis and planning. So we can do a number of in detail work with any public fleet that joins Power Clean Future Ohio. So if you're interested in that, we can look at both the fleet and the infrastructure planning sides. So that's just a little bit more about Clean Fuels Ohio and how we approach electrification with both fleets and infrastructure planning, but really want to talk about the EVSC market right now. And to do that, want to think about the overall market for electrification. So, Bloomberg and many other analysts are projecting quite a rise in electric vehicle adoption over this decade, really driven by a variety of companies bringing new products into the market, a lot of companies and governments and others adopting policies for zero emission vehicle adoption or incentives, the technology itself advancing quite rapidly, better, bigger batteries at lower cost, and that economics really over this decade. If all these trends continue, we should see electric vehicle prices dropping quite substantially, so that initial purchase price is closer to parity with conventional vehicles. And so one of the big economics factors is the price of lithium batteries falling almost 90% over the last decade to about $156 a kilowatt hour. As we sit here today, the key thing most analysts seeing that when battery prices drop below $100 per kilowatt hour, we're likely to achieve closer to price parity for EVs. So as that happens, the analysts are projecting from a pretty small baseline right now, even though there's lots of buzz around electric vehicles, still only about 2.7% of new vehicles in 2020 were EV. The projection is that's going to go way up over this decade to closer to 10% as we begin to hit that price parity sometime mid-decade, to more significant levels to 28% or 30%, somewhere in that range, to a quarter to a third of new vehicle purchases being electric by the end of the decade. So this is the context where lots of folks are really starting to look at, hey, we have sites that make sense for EVSC. Should we install a charging station to host this onslaught of electric vehicles that's coming in the market? So just for some basic context on, I know I see some of the attendees here, this is probably information that you're well versed in, but for those of you who are not, just a quick high-level overview of the EVSC charger options. So right now, what you're looking at is kind of a three-tier of options. There's the level 1 120 volt chargers. You see there the standard 120 volt wall outlet. You can plug an EV into that. It's just going to take a really long time to charge. So most commonly what you see out in the market today is these level 2 208 or 240 volt chargers. For those of you who have electric stoves or washer and dryers at your house, you'll see that 240 volt outlet is a pretty common in even residential locations. So you can hook this up at your facility, a level 2 charger at either a 208 or 240 volt service. Gets a pretty good charge, somewhere between 10 to 15 kilowatts an hour on average, depending on the hardware you're looking at. And you can see there, for residential and commercial use. So a lot of commercial destinations have these as free amenities right now. But increasingly, as batteries scale in size, we're going to need faster charging. Right now, there is this third tier direct current fast charging at 3-phase 480 volt power. Right now, 50 kilowatts an hour is kind of the starting point for that. But there are chargers coming into the market now at 100, 150 kilowatt, even up to 300 kilowatts or more. Not all vehicles can accept those ultra fast charges, but more and more are coming onto the market every day that do. So we're likely to see a lot as a lot more electric vehicles come onto the market, higher powered, faster chargers to service those bigger batteries and more vehicles. And this would be deployed again in a fast charging situation, more like travel corridors and so forth. So that's just a little context on the charging spectrum of hardware and availability there. So in terms of the planning framework, a couple things I'd want to stress is, we've got a whole kind of iceberg here, and the local and retail locations that we see are kind of the tip of the iceberg, as you see here. So really, in terms of deployment, fleets and most motorists that will charge at their home base, whether that's a residence or a fleet depot. The second kind of biggest option or priority for charging is these workplace destinations or other destinations where folks are going to dwell for a longer period of time. And then last but certainly not least, these opportunity charging, particularly in corridors and other areas that will require the faster charging for public users. So just kind of way to kind of get your head wrapped around the marketplace and where some of these use cases are. So those use cases change at the state level, which is kind of looking primarily at fast charging interstate and state route kind of corridors. At the regional level, that might be looking at, a greater metro region and what kind of charging is needed to service the users of that level, or at a local level to say, okay, within this specific city, how do we make sure the motorists and the fleets have the infrastructure they're looking at? So this kind of changes depending on who the end user is and what the site is and what kind of level of planning is required. We have worked with our state DOT to use the federal highway designations of corridors to plan out where these state level chargers need to be, or in many cases where the gaps are now. That is publicly available, came out last summer. A number of our MPOs are working on the regional level to plan this. Pictured here is the NOACA plan for the greater Cleveland region. And then, cities are working on this. Pictured here is some of the work from Smart Columbus. So if you are one of these entities specifically, that's great. We're happy to work with you and connect you with resources and partners. If you're not, making sure you're connecting with your regional planners is always good to make sure you're not being overly redundant and in the best case, filling in some of the gaps as they exist today in the infrastructure. So real briefly, I mentioned this before, if you are a site host, what you're really looking at here is who's using your location. Are they coming from local region or long distances? Are they, how long are they staying there? Are they dwelling there just for a brief amount of time, hours, all day or longer? And what's kind of the purpose of their use of that site? That's really going to determine what kind of charging you need. If they're going to stay there longer, you can get away with more of those level 2 chargers. If they're a high turnover spot with minimal dwell times, then you're probably looking more at that fast charger type of deployment. When you're looking to install, right now, folks are really trying to evaluate chicken and egg. When should I put a charger in? Do I have enough people coming to my site? Do they stay long enough? Do they travel from a far enough distance that they're going to need a lot of energy from coming here? Are they just coming from their house, around the corner? How much is it going to cost to install? We'll hear a little bit more about this from the Pathmaster folks, as well as, some of the key factors that determine costs are how close are you to the building to tie into the electric panels there? Is there enough power available at that panel or at the site, particularly for DC fast chargers? Do you need more utility service at the overall site? is it a new or existing facility? Are you going to have to do retrofits, or can you build this in to the plans from the outset? So a lot of these are factors that can change the scope or the costs involved in supply equipment installations. So on the back end, once it's installed, really looking at how you're going to operate and maintain it, particularly how much is it going to cost. You can work with your utility. If it's putting through 10 kilowatts an hour versus 50 versus 100 kilowatts an hour, you can work with your utility to assess how much it's going to cost you per month. And with pretty much all public network chargers now, you can assess some fees for the end users, whether that's a fixed fee, an hourly rate, or a cost per kilowatt hour. So really thinking through on the back end, how are you going to operate and maintain this to make sure it's either revenue neutral or generating a little revenue for its use. So that's some context on kind of big picture, how to orient yourself within the conversation about planning, deploying, and operating a charging station. So at this point, I'd want to turn this over to Heidi Jacko, who's the Director of Sales for Pathmaster, to talk about Pathmaster's history of working with lots of different end user groups, and now their new electric vehicle supply equipment, their EV charging stations that they're offering. So Heidi.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. So thanks everyone for getting on. Many of you are familiar with Pathmaster. We have been in business for 45 years, and some of you are not familiar with Pathmaster. So that's why it was important for us to just take a moment and kind of introduce ourselves. So we are primarily the traffic distributor for all of Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, and then the Western Pennsylvania side of the state. So anything to do with traffic and traffic technology, Pathmaster has been there. We have worked with numerous cities. ODOT has been obviously a big customer of ours, but many municipalities. And whether it's integrating something simple into the intersection, such as a traffic signal or mast arm, to something in the cabinet, we've been there. And now it's time for us to kind of take another step in the direction of future growth. And that's where we felt that it made sense for the EV charging to come and reside with us. Andrew, you can go to the next screen. So we were founded by Randy Vanskoy in 1976. We're located, like I said, Twinsburg, Ohio. Randy is still very active in our company. He is in all of our meetings, and he is very influential in terms of what we're going to be selling and just ensuring that the company is running up to his standard and expectation. As I stated, we are the distributor of traffic equipment, and our company comprises of the engineers, outside and inside sales teams, customer service teams, and then we do have field techs with boots on the street. So we have 5 field techs that are dispersed throughout our entire territory, and they are there for almost every single cabinet turn on at an intersection. They are there for troubleshooting. If there is ever a municipality or somebody that is having some challenges, our field techs are deployed to them very quickly to help resolve. And then also training. So a big part of our belief is training our customers and giving them that knowledge so that they understand and know how to work the equipment properly. Next screen. So traffic related technology. So again, I know that there are some people that haven't really gone into the traffic world, but trust me when I say that if you are driving in an intersection in Ohio, we have done about 70% of every single intersection within the state of Ohio. So at some point or another, you have crossed ways with Pathmaster, you just didn't know it. But we do traffic poles and lighting, the emergency vehicle preemption, school zone products. So when you see the flashers through that school zone or a speed sign, many times those are coming from our manufacturers. We have traffic detection, traffic calming, smart cities, connected vehicles. And then finally, the last one is the electronic vehicle charging. So we have recently partnered with Gilbarco Veeder-Root. They are our manufacturer for all of our EV charging. And many times you probably would maybe not know who Gilbarco Root would be, But if you go into a gas station, as I did this morning, and you looked at the fuel pump, there is a label that says Gilbarco Veeder Root, and almost every one of these gas stations are using their fueling pumps for fuel. They have also been in the business for the electronic vehicle charging for quite some time. And we really feel that they have a great product with great support, and that it made sense for us to align together. So why did Pathmaster add EV to our portfolio when we have been so integrated into the traffic technology? Why did we kind of step away from our roots? Well, we wanted to obviously be there for our customers, and we know that the climate impact that's influenced government and citizens, the Tesla effect. So Tesla has proven that electric cars work. They're, a little expensive on the front end, but then you make up some costs kind of as the journey of the car kind of continues. But people love Teslas. They enjoy driving them. Charging them isn't as scary as some might have thought to have been the first time. And we see that more and more of any sort of a manufacturer of cars, they're integrating electronic vehicles into their portfolio. Pathmaster also feels that it's very important for us to be at the forefront of technology. So we're always searching for the newest and the best. And that is not only just in new areas, but even in our existing areas. We want to make sure we have the best for our customers and the best solutions. And most importantly, our citizens and businesses are asking for it. When our sales team is out in the field and we're having conversations with our customers and we're just seeing kind of like what's new, what projects are they working on, electronic vehicles have been coming up more and more. So maybe it is a brand new fire station that's being built, and they want to make sure that they are ready for when maybe the commander vehicle starts to go to the EVs. They want to have the charging units right there at their building. At Pathmaster, we're building on a massive addition to our building, and we are putting in 2 EV chargers at the back of the building because we want our employees to be able to utilize them while they come to work. We also offer them for fleets. So, it's eventually the school buses that are not going to run on gasoline as much, but they're going to start to transition over to that electronic school bus. We will be able to service those fleets by offering them those chargers that they can use. And then just as a final kind of slide here, so that is a picture of the new addition with the ground being built at our existing home office. You can see Randy actually in the middle with the shovel. He's getting ready to put some hard work into that groundbreaking. And that's a big picture of a lot of the people who make Pathmaster work. And also, if you're really looking for that more detailed around Gilbarco Veeder Root, the charging, the different layers, the EV2s, the DCs, we are doing a webinar with them next week at 11 a.m. and you can register for that through our website, but that would be a presentation given directly from their representative from Gilbarco. And that's it.
Thanks, Heidi. Before we open this up to Q&A, I want to just touch base on some Ohio-based incentive programs for these kind of chargers that folks can keep their eye on. So at a high level here, there are some federal incentives for this extended through this calendar year, 2021. You can read some of the details here, but the tax credit covers 30% of the cost of qualified property up to $30,000. So EVSC, these chargers are available here. You can see here for property sold to a tax exempt entity such as a school, a hospital, the seller of the property or the hardware can claim the credit. So there are ways for this kind of this credit to be passed on to tax exempt entities. In addition to that, at the state level, the Ohio EPA is administering the Volkswagen diesel mitigation funds. They are planning a fall later this year release of DC fast charging funding. So this would be for those faster chargers available in public corridors throughout the state. So it has to be for public charging, not for fleet charging. They are also going to release an electric vehicle school bus pilot program later this year as well. In addition to that, our Ohio utilities have applied for settlements through the Public Utilities Commission to invest for their utility customers in EVSC. Duke Energy has a $15 million proposal that is pending approval any day now, and Dayton Power and Light for the greater Dayton region was just approved to invest $5 million in charging stations for the greater Dayton region. So probably by the end of the summer, we'll have a lot better feel of what all of these kinds of investments are approved, and then likely that these types of programs will be rolling out in earnest late this year, early next. So those are some of the funding sources available now. The federal government through the U.S. Department of Transportation, the U.S. Department of Energy, and others may be on the verge of releasing more funding. So stay tuned. We'll be keeping our eye on those very closely. But again, the Clean Fuels Ohio side is really about the planning, the funding, and the policies that you put in place after you've got it in the ground. And then we connect up with key partners like Pathmaster and Gilbarco, as well as a number of other vendors and installers, to make sure that the folks we work with, the stakeholders we work with, have all the resources they need on the hardware and the installation side. So with that, I'm happy to have more conversation with folks that are in attendance here, answer any questions, or address any further needs. So as folks are starting to either unmute or chat questions, I wanted to tee you up for a little bit more, Heidi. I know we've been talking to a number of municipalities that are doing street lighting upgrades and traffic signal upgrades, and it seems like there's some tremendous opportunities, particularly if you're a city operating those kinds of assets and doing any kind of upgrade project, that there's some real opportunities to tie into the electrical power service, serving streetlights, to tie in some electric vehicle charging. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit from the Pathmaster perspective.
Sure. So, we would always have a site review with our team and as well as Gilbarco. But yeah, I mean, especially the time really to put these in, it's ideal if it's a, brand new building or something, or a new addition that's going on, because you can tie right into the existing power source. But that would be, something, again, we would want our team of experts and the Gilbarco team to come and take a look at, because we want to make sure that we're supplying it with the right amount of power, and that we're making sure that everything is squared away so that when everything is installed, it's ready to go without any problems whatsoever with it. But yeah, so time is now is when you're first usually breaking that ground, doing the additions. We have seen it where some of these existing buildings are being added on. We just, again, we need to make sure the engineers are properly taking a look at things before we start to just kind of send out quotes and making products arrive.
Yeah, and that's helpful. Thank you. And I see Kevin chatted us a question. The payment, the commercial payments for these chargers, like the fees for end users, are showing up all over the place. But are there any regulatory limits on the fees and rates the charging station provider can assess in fees to the users in Ohio? Great question. It used to be more of a gray area, but it's been fully clarified by both weights and measures at the Department of Ag here in Ohio, as well as the Public Utilities Commission. So the long story short here is that any charging station site host, if you're hosting a charger, if you're the owner and operator of the charger, you need to post information on that charger about how you are assessing fees. And then you are allowed to assess fees in any of three areas or combine the three. You are allowed to assess a time-based fee, $1 per hour, whatever that amount would be. You're allowed to assess a fixed fee, cost $1 just to turn it on and start using it. Or you're allowed to charge a cost per kilowatt hour fee. those three can be done individually, combined in any iteration. So the key thing, you have all the options available to you. The key thing is that statutorily through weights and measures, you are required to post the method of sale at the charger as well. So hopefully that clears that up. If anyone needs to see that in writing from either Weights and Measures or Public Utilities Commission, we have links to that in writing for folks who want the full details. A question for you, Heidi: does Pathmaster offer level 3 chargers from Gilbarco?
Yep. So Brad, we do. We will be offering level 3, the DC chargers. We will be offering those from Gilbarco. Those are a little bit more kind of specialty as opposed to those level 2s, but we absolutely can help you out with those.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the one program that I mentioned just a second ago, the VW grant program here, I'm going to scroll back to it. There will be a release of funding somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 million later this year for public fast chargers, with a priority of fast chargers that fill in gaps on state travel corridors here from our Ohio EPA, and those Gilbarco level 3s would qualify. Heidi, I know you just mentioned that the level 3s are a bit of a different animal. I mentioned this a little bit in the sense that they're much higher power. Maybe you could speak to some of the due diligence or the planning steps a site host would have to take when considering a level 3 charger.
Yeah, I don't have like the exact kind of like wattage, but it's definitely not something that you can just tap into your regular electrical for and then start utilizing it. There's just obviously so much power coming through those lines, and it's coming so quickly. And it is going to involve a lot more of an installation. So as opposed to those level 2s that could get installed rather quickly, the DCs and the level 3s, they are much more just much more invasive in terms of like you're going to have to possibly do some trenching. You're going to have to tap into a much bigger electrical source. It's not going to just automatically appear, and it will take somebody, the electrical engineer, to kind of really ensure that the right place is correctly chosen and it could do the supply that's needed.
Yeah, thanks for that. And certainly it sounds like Gilbarco is going to cover this in much more detail in an upcoming webinar that you're all hosting with them.
You got it. I say Gilbarco, the one for next week, he will be able to give you much more specifics around what those level 3s are going to need, what is going to be required in order to properly utilize them. So Gilbarco will have all those very specific numbers if you're interested in those specs.
Yeah, and Heidi, maybe in the background here, you can drop a link to register for that webinar for folks, if that makes sense. For folks who want more information. I know we're working with a couple of heavy duty fleets that are deploying some of those Gilbarco fast chargers, actually in partnership with Volvo and some Volvo vehicles and some other OEMs. So to Heidi's points, I mean, you're really looking at 3-phase 480 volt power, which is basically a commercial level of service, and specifically may require utility upgrades like a new pole and new transformers depending on the building you're tying into. So that's something you want to closely look at and factor into the cost beyond just the cost of the hardware for the charging and its install itself. In addition to that, because they're flowing through such high volumes of power, there's 2 other things to keep in mind with fast chargers. First is that, with a lot of power comes a lot of heat. So those faster chargers actually have internal cooling systems that do need some maintenance over their lifetime, whereas the level 2 chargers are essentially a glorified plug and don't really need any maintenance. So that's something that some of the early adopters weren't always well aware of, and I've seen some fast chargers that haven't had any maintenance that have essentially fried some of the internal circuitry. So factoring in the maintenance cost for those chargers is something else to think of if you're flowing through that much power, as well as on the utility bill side. High volumes of power, one of the differences between electric vehicles conceptually right now versus liquid fueled vehicles is particularly for fleets. On the liquid fuel side, fleets are used to negotiating volumetric discounts. If I use more fuel, I'll get a little bit of discount the more I use. Electricity has historically been priced in the exact opposite. You're actually disincentivized from using higher volumes. So the two ways that that's typically done with utilities is through peak charges. Right now we're sitting in July. You're charged a higher rate for electricity per kilowatt hour from most utilities during peak hours, like noon to 5 when everybody's got their AC on. So you want to be wary of peak charges, as that can kind of pretty significantly change your utility bill, especially when you're flowing through 50 kilowatts or more an hour. And the second category is demand charges. A number of utilities structure their bills to say, you're going to get this rate per kilowatt hour in that building, as long as that building doesn't exceed 100 kilowatts per month per se. This is just a hypothetical, but it's illustrative of the way this works. And then for every extra kilowatt you use, we'll charge you $1,000 more, kind of like extra data charges for your cell phone bill, if you will. That is usually not an issue when you're on a building and it's got a pretty fixed load of, the heat's on at this time, the lights are on at this time, the AC's on at this time, kind of over the life cycle of that building, what the draw is, and you're pretty safe never to go over that. Once you put in one of these fast chargers, those demand charges are something to really closely look at, because if you're getting 50 kilowatts, 100 kilowatts or more per hour, you can quickly exceed those monthly demand charges and get into pretty high racked up bill of costs. So whenever you're installing a fast charger, you really want to make sure, as Heidi was saying, that you've done the right engineering and planning on the front end, that you have the power supply, that you have a process in place to maintain it, and that that you're not going to run into any hidden fees from the utility in its operations. So we got another question chatted to us. The question is, will Pathmaster be offering any ongoing fee-based monthly or yearly service for things like the cell modem, networking connection, billing, or maintenance services on the Gilbarco chargers?
Yes. So the answer to that is yes. So we will do it's going to be yearly. And I think we are trying to look at maybe wrapping a couple years into that, but we're willing to work with you, Kevin. Again, this is a whole new venture for us. But we will have all that wrapped up into there. And then, that would encompass all the software utilization and all that, your modem, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, and to those points, for those who are not experienced with these chargers, they are very user friendly on the admin side. So you do have a networking fee if you want them networked. Networking them connects them to the internet effectively, gives you full optics on who's using them, how they're using them, allows you to admin them. So you can just log into a simple web-based portal and say, the utility just raised my cost per kilowatt from 7 cents a kilowatt to 8 cents a kilowatt. You can literally just log in, make that change if you were charging price per kilowatt. Very simple and transparent for the admin of this. And then it's often great to have a partnership with an experienced party like a Pathmaster or Gilbarco to maintain those if they are fast chargers that require maintenance. I know you're getting ready to chat that link for the Gilbarco charger presentation. Certainly there are lots of hardware providers out there to meet folks' needs, but Gilbarco is certainly, as Heidi mentioned, a great partner to be working with lots of experience with fueling technology, both charging and beyond. Clean Fuels Ohio has on our website some other webinar-based resources on different EVSC products and vendors in the marketplace. And we're launching this week a solutions showcase part of our website that has even more information on that. Not seeing another question right now, so I'm going to pause for just a second to see if any folks have more questions. If we don't have more questions, we can wrap up early and let everybody get back on with their day. Anyone have any more questions?
You can always reach out to us, pathmasterinc.com. My email was there. Andrew and his team are extremely knowledgeable. They've been doing this for a long time. But yeah, so definitely feel free to reach out with any questions and we can get back to you as soon as we can.
Great. Yeah. And just another question being chatted in right now. Any plans to implement vehicle to grid? So I can just mention a couple high level things on the utility engagement side. I've recently had conversations with AEP and some of the other utilities. From the utility side, there's a couple wrinkles to iron out, if you will. Utilities view vehicle to grid assets as distributed energy resources, and most utilities have a pathway of working with distributed energy resources that are connecting up to their grid. The folks at AEP that I talked to recently were saying, hey, we have this whole pathway. A customer can say they've got this and connect it up like they would have done solar or other kind of local point generation. And we have a whole pathway for that, but no one yet in our territory has done a vehicle to grid project. So in Ohio, there hasn't been much of this done yet, but most of the utilities are ready to work with folks who are bringing them on. The key thing for vehicle to grid is to get a bidirectional fast charger that can take the energy off the vehicle onto the grid and put that back onto the vehicle when the vehicle needs it. And not all chargers are available with that technology yet, but it's coming. Heidi, is there anything you'd want to add there?
Nope, I think that's perfect, Andrew. Yeah, we haven't really kind of ventured down that path yet. So I think kind of where you've just added is probably good.
Yeah, I'd be happy to follow up with anyone who's looking at vehicle to grid projects in Ohio. There's some successful models in other states. We're closely involved with some of the vendors of those products and services, and would be happy to see a vehicle to grid project in Ohio and support it in any way we can. Any other questions before we yield you back the balance of the hour?
Great.
Yeah, not seeing any. So thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us, and hopefully you can join Gil Barco next week to learn more in depth about their EVSC charger options, as well as get connected to Clean Fuels Ohio and Pathmaster on best next steps for deploying chargers here in the state. So thank you again for your time, and really look forward to connecting with you all moving forward.
No, thank you. And thank you, Andrew, and your organization. You guys have been fantastic, and you guys have a great resource on your website. So for those of you who are looking for more information, definitely look at the Clean Fuels Ohio website. I found it very interesting to kind of peruse through there.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi, and thanks everyone for attending. Look forward to connecting with you moving forward. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.